What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Fantasy Files Podcast, where we talk about our favorite fantasy series and topics. We are your co-hosts, Spencer and Gabe, and today we are joined by one of the hosts of the Dresden Files Podcast, Justin. How's it going?
It's going all right. How are you guys?
Doing
Wonderful.
Great. Today, we will be discussing the sixth book in the Dresden Files series, Blood Rites. And then next week, Gabe and I will be discussing a horror book that is yet to be determined to shamelessly capitalize on the Halloween season.
It's got to be done.
It's got to be
right.
done.
It's got to be done.
If you want to keep up on what we're reading and what our next episodes will be, please follow us on Twitter at Files Fantasy, and don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube. With all that out of the way, let's introduce our guest and talk about what we've been reading this last week. So Justin, you are one of the hosts on the Dresden Files podcast. Can you talk a little bit about what you guys do over there, what your episodes usually contain, and where people can listen to it?
So we've been doing the Dresden Files podcast for, 5-6 years now. I think we started right after Cold Days came out, or Skin Game, one of those. Like, it had literally just come out pretty much. So we've been doing it for a while. We get into all sorts of Dresden adjacent everything for the Dresden Files podcast. Anyway, we've got another one that we do more pop culture-y stuff. But as far as like Dresden Files, we've talked about some of the deeper folklore. We talk about, some of his personality traits. Lately, we've been doing a jam on TV tropes. So if you've got really bad fan theories out there and fan canon, you got a big old bullseye on yourself right now. So that's been our thing. I mean, we did like 5 episodes breaking down Battlegrounds and just all the nonsense that happens there, because it's just such a thick book. Like, we couldn't, we only do about an hour, and so you just can't get through and do it justice in that amount of time. So so that's mostly our jam. You can find us on YouTube. If you just search Dresden Files Podcast, you'll find our YouTube or Twitter. You can also go to brokenjars.xyz. We put up audio files and have links to all our other podcasts and stuff there as well. So that's our overall network that we use. So
nice. Okay, cool. I'll ask you the same question that you guys ask on your show. I think, what are your top 3 favorite Dresden Files books, and why do you love the Dresden Files?
Yeah, I'm glad I got the notes early, because I definitely had a momentary panic, like, oh crap, what are my 3 favorites anymore? Like, when I did this the first time, like, there were like 3 to 5 less books than there are now. But I was thinking about it, like, my answer hasn't changed too much, right? So like, accepting changes, because it does kind of like stand on its own and is great for a bunch of reasons. Like, my 3 favorites break down to Deadbeat, which, I guess I can't talk too much about all the books because you guys don't do spoilers so much, but
right.
So Deadbeat is great. That's the next book. Very exciting. Also very Halloween appropriate. If you need a plug and, me to tip you towards a book, but I'm sure there's other great answers as well. Turncoat is long time been one of my favorites. It's, in my opinion, it's one of the most cinematic, where it's like, if you're a huge fan of the MCU and that sort of thing, like, you can live Turncoat, in my opinion. You could just be there, right? And then Skin Game, actually. Not catering to the audience here, Gabe, but no, it was prescient that's where you started, because it's just so good to see Harry really get to cut loose. Like, a lot of books he's handicapped in one way or another. Like, talking about the first 3 books, even, in Stormfront, he's kind of all in, but he's against mortals. So he's got one hand behind his back. In Full Moon, he gets his butt completely kicked before he even makes it to the end. I think no, it's summer night. He finally gets to like the end battle, and he's mostly intact because he's going up against fairies, right? And he's got nothing to going on. Skin Game's kind of like that, right? Where he's just completely off the reservation. He's got to be clever. He's got to have his wits about him. He's got to use all his magical tricks, and a bunch of allies, notwithstanding everything like that. So that's definitely one of my favorites. But
I think that's one of the reasons why I like White Knight so much, is because that whole book, he's basically just investigating. And then there's that big battle at the end where he really gets to cut loose, and we get to see like Harry at his like most fine-tuned up to that point.
Right.
Is pretty cool.
And White Knight, like, just to add to that, like White Knight definitely, it kind of, I feel like, sets some of the tone for some of the stuff you'll get in a similar scene and changes, right? And so like you're like, oh, wait a minute, this sounds familiar because he did some of this stuff before. He's had to tangle with these kinds of enemies, so
right. All right, so what are you, besides Dresden Files, are you reading anything now? And if not, what do you like to read besides Dresden?
Yeah, it's been a little bit since I've read. Despite the pandemic, I've actually been doing like more gaming. That's just kind of my jam, right? But one of the last books that I remember reading that really stuck with me, and I'm excited because the movie just came out, is Dune.
Okay.
I managed to actually read that before I even started hearing like they had a movie coming down the pipeline. And my dad was a big Dune fan, so like I already knew about the movies, and I knew about the TV specials and whatever else has come out in the last like 20 or 30 years, right? So I'm like, do a good job. And then you start to see the cast, and you're like, yeah, they're putting money on this, so hopefully it works out. But that's probably one of the main things. I mean, outside of that, like my wheelhouses are definitely sci-fi, fantasy, horror. I'm a real softie for dystopian stuff, right? So anything where we're fighting the apocalypse, or just on the flip side of post-apocalyptic, those are all, you're gonna find me right there.
Nice.
Yeah. Are you I think I've asked every single guest for the past like 4 or 5 episodes, but are you excited for the Wheel of Time show or the Lord of the Rings show that's coming out?
So as a fan and a dedicated podcaster, I have very inflammatory opinions. No, I'm just kidding. But so I did not get huge into Wheel of Time, right? So like I'm along for the ride, but maybe in a similar place. Like I also didn't read Harry Potter when it came out, right? So like I enjoyed the movies for Harry Potter, and I enjoy the world building and stuff like that, but I haven't done the books, and I don't get nearly as upset as like Harry Potter nerds do, right? Star Wars and Star Trek, those are the ones that I will tirade about for the next 2 hours if we really want to. But Lord of the Rings, I'm cautiously optimistic, right? Because like I'm on the Lord of the Rings subreddit and a few other things, and like they get all the news, and they're worried about them sexing up the Lord of the Rings and stuff like that, so that's a lot of the memes and the jokes that come through. So I mean, we already know, like, as great as the movies were, liberties were taken, sometimes unnecessarily. And so like you can only imagine what a big wig executive is going to do, right? Like it may be better in some ways, but I'm kind of holding judgment until it comes out, so
fair enough.
So sexing up the Lord of the Rings, do you not want to see hobbits have Game of Thrones sex on TV?
I didn't want to. So there's another one I didn't watch, right? I didn't make it past the first episode, right? I don't want to see Game of Thrones people having Game of Thrones sex. So, like nobody needed to see Jamie and what's his sister's name? Anyway, I'm not even hamming it up, but that's the thing. Like, like Game of Thrones was way outside of my wheelhouse, right? Like we got incest, we got child rape, we got, no, thank you. Like none of those themes interest me. I was infinitely more interested in the world building and the politics, but to get there wasn't worth the price of admission. So yes, Lord of the Rings, like even if you've got, for some reason, you've got a human and an elf making love to a hobbit, that's probably, I don't know, man.
Yeah,
Like that,
yeah.
I'm not gonna kink shame, but that's not my jam, right?
Yep, yep.
That's awesome. So you must not be a fan of like grimdark kind of books then, like some of the
Not
darker
necessarily
fantasy.
though, right? So
Yeah.
I hit a weird kind of thing. Like I'm okay with violence, ultra violence. It depends on the flavor, right? I don't do torture porn. I don't do buckets of blood, right?
Yeah.
Freddy versus Jason, really kind of on the other side of that. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, other side of that, right?
Yeah.
Aliens, Predator, Terminator, like all of those are great. Grew up on those. Even Freddy Krueger, and I know how that sounds, right?
Yeah.
But like that's why I did Freddy versus Jason, is because Freddy Krueger was like one of my first, like monsters, I guess,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
like I have a real thing about violence against women and children, but
Yeah.
then grimdark is in for a different thing, because I'm also like a huge Cthulhu mythos fan, right?
Mm.
And so
Right.
like a lot of the reason why I like the dystopia thing is because you got your average Joe fighting shit that he could not possibly beat.
Yeah.
And
Right.
and so stuff like Big Trouble in Little China, as campy as it is, captures that like to a T. Like, he's a thousands-year-old demon, we're gonna go fight him. I'm a trucker, what the hell am I doing here, guys? That sort of thing, right? And so yeah, it's, I don't know, maybe it is a little bit more niche in what my tastes are, but yeah, like 40K and all of that's great, but you're almost dealing with like the cosmic horror of war, right? Like 40K
Yeah.
just goes so over the top that it's like humanity is on its last legs. It just doesn't know it yet, because it's such a massive empire that like it doesn't know that the death song has already started, like
Right.
I mean, if you want to go deep into the lore and whatever there, but yeah, so some of that stuff, like if you guys have watched Dark on Netflix, like it was
Yes.
a German show.
Oh my
that-
God, yes.
that was twisted, but it was still like, because it was clever and well done, and like the casting was on point, like there were so many good things about that. And I did not hate the ending, right? There was a huge backlash from a big subset of the fans, right? So
Yeah.
Mhm.
See, I didn't even know about the backlash to the ending, because I don't think I ever like checked the Reddit on that or anything, but that is seriously one of my favorite endings in television. Like
Right.
that, the ending to Dark, I went crazy over that.
Hmm.
Now I
Yeah,
gotta
the
watch
director's
it.
go ahead.
No, I just was saying now I gotta watch it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, the director's a huge fan. We call her the director. She's the gal that more or less runs, our episode structure and everything. And like, she's a huge fan. She finally got me to watch it. It had been on my watch list forever anyway. And I'm so
Yeah.
glad that I didn't watch it season to season, and that I was able to just kind of binge it.
You have
But
to
yeah,
binge
like,
it.
yeah, I mean, I could not imagine, trying to watch that weekly, or even just one season and wait a year, like
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
it would have been brutal. Yeah.
Yeah, I hopped on to watch that when season 2 had just come out, and then I had to wait. I think we waited like I want to say it was like 2 years or so until the third came out, because it took a little longer for the third season to come out. And that show is there's so many things you have to remember, and so many things to like
yeah.
keep track of, that watching the third season, I got a couple episodes into it and I'm like, I don't remember what happened. And I had to go back and watch everything again. But yeah, it is a very bingeable show for sure.
Right.
Gabe, what have you been reading recently? I think you read Expanse 4, right?
Yep. So I read Expanse 4, Cibola Burn, or however you say that. That was
Yeah.
absolutely incredible.
Right.
Honestly, though, I don't think I liked it as much. It was a super good book, but I don't think I liked it as much as the first book.
Okay.
And I know
Yeah,
you're gonna be like,
I-
"What the heck?" Or do you
no,
agree?
no,
Okay.
I totally understand that. I'm even a little bit confused on whether I would put it ahead of the first book
Yeah.
or not.
Okay. For sure. Yeah. So, but it was really good.
yeah.
The story was awesome, and there was a lot more that filled out. And I like reading those books because like every book is like a completely separate like problem, right? Like
Right.
there's a main problem that falls through, but it's like has its own. I don't know. Every book has this like own area that it dives into, so that's super cool. And that was a fun one. The way that they set it up was really cool. And then I listened to Dresden Files, obviously, Blood Rites. We did that. And then I also listened to, it's only an 8-hour book, but I listened to the first book of the Iron Druid Chronicles again.
Oh, cool.
Yep.
Very
and so
nice.
I really like those. I don't know what it is, but I love the lore and the folklore and all the Nordic stuff is really intriguing to me. And yeah, it's fun. But that's it. That's all I've read since the last thing.
Right on. Justin, do you read any other like urban fantasy type books? Have you ever read like Iron Druid or Oath Broken or any of those?
No, so ironically, like I'm actually not really a lit nerd, like I don't do a ton of reading,
Sure.
right? Like certainly since the Dresden Files, I've opened myself up a little bit more because I went from, like my best friend reads it, my other best friend reads it, my wife reads it, and then finally I had a coworker be like, shut up, here's the first audiobook, right?
Nice.
And then I went from that to like, being a major host in a podcast, right? So I have a weird journey, but yeah, like I've read through, I think it was like the Vampire Chronicles had Marsters reading it like as the narrator. So that was a big part. I can't remember who the author was. The Expanse is on my short list. I've been working through some of the classics and stuff like that, right? So I'm trying to remember, like I've really been into Puppet Master. I'm trying to remember the author for all that. Everybody's Robert A. Heinlein. Everybody's yelling at me if they were watching live. No,
we're good.
I'm good with it either way, right? We do
it
live, so I'm used to it. I'm used to getting shit thrown at me. But Robert Heinlein. Like I wouldn't say like I universally loved his stuff, but like Puppet Masters was just really good. Like I remember the movie and just kind of like some of the dread from that, but even like reading it kind of recaptures it, right? Like some of it for me was like, I'm much bigger into like movies, TV shows, like that sort of thing. Like that's a lot of what I grew up on. I got force fed, certain kinds of reading, like a bunch of weird old sci-fi that my dad was into, right?
Yeah.
And Heinlein, could be some of that, right? But like some of his stuff really did capture some of the dread or some of the emotions that you wanted. Whereas like I didn't always have that didn't always work for me, right? Like I was like, I'm never going to read Stephen King, right? Because Stephen King is not scary. I'm not going to get scared by a book. I want to tell you, as an adult, having read it and a few other things. I had a nightmare after, in the middle of reading it. Like the things that bother me about Stephen King are the 25 chapters worth of Americana that I could give a crap about, right? So in it kind of becomes plot relevant. You've got some of it in Salem's Lot, I want to say, and then The Stand, right? The Stand, it was like completely irrelevant in my opinion. Like you could have cut out a third of that book because we didn't need to know that because everybody's dead, right?
Yeah.
So I guess that I was on that kick for a little while too, going through a lot of Stephen King's like more iconic stuff.
Yep.
And The Stand really got me prepared for our current situation. I'm just kidding. He hates that reference. Don't say that. But The Mist is another good one too, because that kind of got me kicked on that. Like The Mist is one of my favorite horror movies, but it was also like it was a great place for me to start with Stephen King, and it was a pretty good book as well. Like they're very similar, honestly. Cutting out the gratuitous sex, since we're Puritans around here.
No, I've been meaning to read Stephen King. I don't think I've read any of his stuff. I was even looking at a couple for our upcoming Halloween episode.
That's what I was gonna say.
Not bad. I mean, if you need shorter, The Mist is more of a novella. It is more like War and Peace, I think. So it is extremely long, but The Stand, The Stand was really good. But I mean, like The Stand is kind of funny because it skirts along some of his mysticism and some of the like the religion stuff and things like that he likes to sneak into a lot of his books, but like the miniseries almost captures it better in a way, like because I think the miniseries like weighs some of that stuff, whereas in the book it's like 80% of it felt like their journey getting to, you know, their new Eden or whatever the place was that they were going to. And then at the end you have the like climactic battle that was like, wait, that was it, you know, like you've built this up for like all this time, and then, you know, but you know, again, just kind of like the horror of like, it starts out with like, it is today, and then we catch the flu, and then everybody dies, and it's terrible, you know. So but it's a pretty good book overall. So
nice. Okay, for sure. Okay, so let's talk about what I read this past week. So I read Jade City, which is another it's another urban fantasy series that's come out in recent years, I think within the past 3 years or so. And I'm reading it now because the third one comes out in November, is the finale to the trilogy. And everyone has been telling me to read this book for so long. Like, so many people are like saying that it's like, it's so good, you got to read it. And I put it off for a long time. When I finally read it, I was like, I get it. Like, this book is really, really good, and I'm really stoked to start the next one. It's basically magical Yakuza. And so these, so like these kind of Asian style gangs have this stuff called jade, and it's like this jewelry that they wear, or they can like pierce it into themselves and stuff. And it allows them to do like all sorts of stuff. Like, they can move around like a superhero, they can do like a force push kind of thing. And it was just really a ton of fun. And there was some major kind of twists that happen. Like, the author is not afraid to just kill characters off. And so, yeah, I really liked it.
Nice.
Okay. I was like, did we lose Justin?
No, we record earlier, so I was like, oh shit, it's getting dark, and like I'm flipping between like, you know, I've got night mode tabs, and then I've got like the docks, and I'm like, I should turn off the docks, like I should see if I can make that dark mode, and then I'm like, then no one could see me. So
yeah. I was wondering, I'm like, is he sitting in the dark?
It wasn't when we started, but it is winter now, so it's getting
that's right,
like,
exactly.
So the other book that I read this week besides Blood Rites is called Of Blood and Fire, and this is a self-published book that I've wanted to read for a long time. And it's I don't really know how to explain it. It's a fantasy, not a typical fantasy story. It does have its own like kind of twist on things, but it's kind of like a coming of age farm boy to chosen one kind of fantasy story. And I really liked it. I think that it did a lot of cool things, and there was plenty of action and plenty of intrigue. And yeah, it was a ton of fun. That one's by Ryan Cahill, I think. Cahill.
Nice.
And yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was kind of one of those ones, like I think people who are fans of the Rairia Revelations books would really like this. I felt it was very similar. It's kind of a little bit more of like I guess more like basic story that was like really easy to follow. And so kind of like Voice of War, I never had to worry about like what's going on right now or anything. It was all pretty front and center, easy to keep track of. The one problem that I had with it, and I don't even know if I would really call it a problem, it was just something that gave me a certain impression of the book. I feel like the main character of the book is, I think, 18 and getting close to 19 by the end of the book. And the audiobook narrator, I felt like, made the character sound like he was like 13 or 14. And so I actually I messaged the author on Twitter, and I was like, hey, how old is Kalen, the main character, supposed to be? And he's like, oh, he just turned 18 at the beginning of the book. and it like kind of shocked me. I was like, oh wow, I thought this was like a like in King Killer when Quoth, starts out the book as like 12 years old or whatever he is. And so I thought that's what they were going for. And then even after he told me that the main character was 18, 19, the whole rest of the book, I couldn't picture anything else other than like maybe like a 14-year-old as the main character. And so I don't know. It doesn't seem like a lot of other people have that same problem with it. So it might have just been me. But if that's something that that you're like, I guess, sensitive to, like if that's something that you would notice and it would kind of ruin your image of the character, I would say read it in physical copy.
Yeah.
But otherwise the narrator did a great job. All the other voices were fantastic, and everything else was done really well. And also the narrator for Jade City was very, very good as well.
Nice.
I'm currently reading in physical copy the first Wheel of Time book, The Eye of the World, and I am only at the 5th chapter, but I am loving it so much that I am going to pick up the audiobook tonight so I can listen while I'm at work tomorrow, because I am really loving this book. And I know, like everybody says, like it gets really complex and there's some lulls in the story and it kind of slows down at points. And, so far it hasn't been that way at all, but I know it's probably coming in a later book or something. So hopefully I'll understand enough of the world by the time it does get more complex, and it'll be easy to follow. But for now, I'm having a fantastic time with it. Next, I'm probably going to read the Emberblade Chronicles. I think it's Chronicles, or maybe the Emberblade Saga. I don't know too much about it. Just another kind of epic fantasy book. Yeah.
Sweet.
All right. So should we get into Blood Rites, or get to the topic of the hour, Blood Rites discussion? Everybody, this is your spoiler warning for Blood Rites. We will not spoil, or we'll try not to spoil any future books. And so we'll try to stay away from those, but we are going to spoil Blood Rites. So if you haven't read it, please pause this and come back after you do. Spoiler warning in 3, 2, 1. You've been warned. Okay, so we I know. So Gabe and Justin, I would love for you to vote on this too. How would we rank the books up to this point? I think on the last episode we were basically going in backwards order, like Death Masks as number 1, Summer Night, and then Grave Peril, and then I think we switched Stormfront and Full Moon, as Stormfront being 4 or whatever, and then Full Moon being the last one. What is your guys's level of love for Blood Rites? Where would you kind of rank it within that first 6 books?
So I would probably say, I got the books up on my phone because I'll forget what they're called.
Yeah.
I would say that I think, for at least for me, I think the Blood Rites would be up there, like in the top 5 or 6, or top 1 or 2 or whatever you want to say.
Right.
And because I think that a lot of stuff happens in this book that carries so far on into, the next books or whatever. And so I enjoyed that a lot. There's a lot of fighting, which I loved. And Thomas, of course, there was a big moment with Thomas that was really cool.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I would put it up higher, and maybe I would put Blood Rites and Summer Night, and then probably Grave Peril would
As
be my
the top 3.
Yeah.
Okay. What about you, Justin? Do you feel the same way, or do you like the previous ones more?
Yeah, I think I like Grave Peril is one of my more favorite ones, and I know it could be a controversial pick because it suffers a lot mechanically, right? Like it really is just so much going on, and it's so large that like my second read through was like, holy crap, this all took place in the same book, because it's like you've got so many subplots and things like that. But it really does kick off the Dresden Files in a lot of ways, right? Like, you still reference stuff that happens in Stormfront, you still reference stuff that happens in Full Moon, but not like Grave Peril, man. Like Grave Peril is still being referenced, in today's works, right? It wasn't even like in like 5 books, we'll come back to it. No, it's still important, right? So that's probably like top overall in my opinion, but for a long time I've always said that Death Masks has the best ending of the books, and Blood Rites has the best beginning of the books. And so like, and maybe that's waffled a little bit because again, there's a bombshell in Changes that it's like, holy shit, as far as like emotional impact, or even Peace Talks has another really good opening line, right? But so like Death Masks ends with Satellite Dresden, right? Like that's just fantastic. That's so good. And then Blood Rites, if you're just blowing through the books like I did, the next line is, the building is on fire and it wasn't my fault. Like one of the like top Dresden lines, period. Even still today, so those definitely make it up there. I'm trying to think, like I might put Blood Rites as high as number 2 out of the first 6, right? Death Masks, again, it kind of, like it is great and greatness happens in it and it sets up quite a bit. But like most of the book is not necessarily fantastic, right? But then like you get to the end, it's great. Summer Night, again, it's kind of all over the place. I think just because like Harry's in the dark until he finally gets his boots on, and then he gets to go to war, right? So, and I don't know. I hated Full Moon for a long time, so it's easy to put Full Moon and Stormfront towards the bottom for a variety of reasons. But like if any of you guys are brown coats out there, that each and every one of these is precious, and just because I said Stormfront was last doesn't mean that I hated it. Like that's it. They're all my children, but if we got to have, a stack rank where it matters, then I could see Blood Rites being in the top 3 out of those 6 for sure. So
nice.
That's kind of what Gabe and I were talking about last week, is how even like in some ways I hate Ghost Story, but even then it's still a Dresden Files book, right? Like it's still like I love every single one of these books. Like I would be happy to be like, stranded on a deserted island with any of these books. And so that's such an interesting thing about the Dresden Files, is how none of them are really bad. Like I mean, there's ones that I definitely like less than others, but I'm happy with all of them.
Yep.
And Death Masks, the other part of that ending that is like one of my favorite pieces of that ending is where Marcone has the shroud and he takes it to the girl in the hospital. That was such a impactful scene. We talked about it at length on our Death Mask episode, but that was a favorite for me. Matter of fact, I think that I would rank Death Masks above Blood Rites just because like Blood Rites, there's like one moment in Blood Rites that is really like deeply personal for me, and then everything else is kind of like it's the porn book, right? Like, what I mean? Like,
I was going to say deeply personal. So you were a porn star in another life.
Right.
That's cool. That's
no. No, but like, and so Blood Rites, it kind of has a lot of, I felt like, even though there is things that impact the story later on, for me, it felt like it was kind of a lot of filler with a couple really key moments throughout. So I think for me, I would probably rate Death Masks above it. And as far as Grave Peril, you're absolutely right. Like that is one of like the most important books to the Dresden Files. Everything that happens at Bianca's party is still affecting us in current books. And just everything that happened with Susan. And the thing that I think is so important about that book is Jim Butcher has said that Grave Peril is like the kickoff for Mirror. Like there's an event in there that changes, that in an alternate dimension it changes and it kicks off the events of Mirror. And so I think Grave Peril might be one of my like most read Dresden Files books, just so I could try to figure out what that event is.
Right.
All right. So, I guess we kind of talked about our initial impressions of Blood Rites. What did you guys think of the final fight scene in this book? I guess there would be two. There would be the Mavra part where they're kind of doing like this dungeon crawler kind of party up and go raid the dungeon kind of thing. And then there's the old switcheroo that Harry and Murphy do in the deeps. What did you guys think of these big battle scenes?
I mean, they're all great for a variety of reasons, right? There's just so much that kind of goes into, dealing with the Scourge and Mavra and the like. You've got you even just leading up to that, right? You've got Kincaid meeting Murphy, and they're kind of like sizing each other up in the Denny's. Down to the fact that like you said, it's a dungeon crawl, right? And it's so easy to pick out which of the D&D archetypes are in their party, right? Because so you've got the actual wizard, right? Like, yeah, we get it. Harry is a wizard, but the freaking Blackstaff of the senior council shows up to do the Gandalf thing, right? Whatever he is doing is immensely important, but you're not going to see or be a part of any of that, right? Then you've got the guy who actually knows what's going on, which is Kincaid, in my opinion, even though he pretends to be dumb, but he's also like very clearly like the rogue assassin type, right? Where, like when they show up, he's like, okay, I got the building evacuated. And they're like, well, how did you do that? Well, it just so happens that they might have thought that there was a gas leak and I was a cop. Well, how did they think that? Because I just might happen to have a badge. Where did you get that? I found it. Murphy clearly being the paladin in this instance, and she's lawful whatever she is, right? So she's like, you and I are gonna have words later, but let's go save the children first, or whatever. But there's just so many details. I mean, talk about stuff that's paying off later or has yet to be answered, right? There's still quibbles about what Harry saw when he used his sight. And you have the instance with him getting his hand burned, and just like, I don't know, do you want to go through the whole scene right now? But there's greatness. You've got Kincaid hitting on Murphy while they're working. From the notes and everything like that. The paintball gun, right? But it's clever. It's using the in-world science. And it's acknowledging the fact that Harry is shit. He's just a bad shot. He's a liability, and if it were anything north of a 1911, he probably would make it jam and explode in their face anyway, right? So they had to get him something that, and I'm like a longtime paintballer, right? So the fact that sport gets referenced is a great little thing for me. But so you get all of that. You get your modern vampire hunt. You got Kincaid's boomstick. And just all of that, which gets referenced in other like survival horror type settings, right? So it's like if you're a fan of the genre, you're like, oh yeah, this is great to bring that in. So,
is that a common weapon in survival horror? The thing he had.
I'm not sure. I would say, I'm not sure. I would say it's super common, right? Like, like real world modern references, like I think he talks about it in the guise of like hog hunting, right? But they also do something like that with sharks at times if they're going to free dive with sharks. So like it's a real thing, which is great too. But I can't think of like I know it's been referenced in one movie or another, right? But it was one of those like when he brings it out, it's like, game recognizes game, right? Where it's like, Kincaid really is, a badass. He really is a professional. He really does his homework. You do get quite a good taste of that in Death Masks with the Dragon's Breath rounds, right? Which at the time, like, I mean, I'm decently into firearms, and I think like I had heard of them once before he goes off like shooting them and whatever. But you've got certain well-known YouTubers, without giving another plug, but like they have episodes going into those rounds and stuff. But so it's just seeing Kincaid work, and like two of the things that I like about the Dresden Files is the professionals and when people are being clever, right? They're using the in-world rules, they're using their wits, and they're playing chess more than they are unleashing fireballs, right? Like going inside and just letting off fireballs and stuff like that, that's all well and good. That would have been equally entertaining, but hard to say that was better. And even Mavra being clever against Harry, she's supernaturally powerful. She doesn't have to be using the gimmicks that she is. She uses a freaking flamethrower on him. Because most wizards don't know how to block thermal energy. They know how to deflect magical attacks, but not deal with the secondary effects, right? So she's, again, being clever. And then, to kind of cap it off as a cherry on top, right? Harry's doing this delaying action. He all but loses his hand. And at the end, he unleashes a gale of wind to like, rival hurricanes. And Kincaid's like, holy crap. I've never seen a wizard really kick off before. And it's like, buddy, you still haven't.
Yes,
it's like, again, like this book, as far as lines, right? It's like some of the top lines are in this book out of the whole series. So
you'll notice that obviously we won't go through them all, but the quote section of the notes here is massive, because I was like, there's so many good lines in this book. I absolutely love them all. But yeah, that was an extremely cool moment, especially the way Marsters did it on the audiobook. There was kind of this like, Kincaid says that like, I've never seen a wizard cut loose. And there's kind of like this pause, and he's like, you still haven't. And it's just like, it's cool.
Doesn't he have some like inner monologue where he's like, I can't let Kincaid think that I'm, this or that. But yeah, that's a cool moment. I agree.
Yeah, he was like, I might as well, scare him a little bit and try to earn some reputation. What did you guys think of, or Gabe, what did you think of the fight in the deeps?
Oh,
we get at the end there.
Yeah, so that's what I was gonna say. Ask me about fights. First of all, I love the one with Mavra. I love seeing Kincaid. I really enjoy him as a character, and kind of what he said, just along the lines of he's very professional, right? He's kind of this professional, or super professional assassin. But I just like his interactions. They're cool. But the deeps, I really love the political maneuvering that happens with Lara. So like, I really enjoy seeing how Harry kind of works this thing, and Lara like, okay, all right, I can see how that might work, on and on, until eventually, like, what they talked about hours prior became the end game, when Lara's, basically, making her father submit, right? Just like destroying him and win. So I love the fight. I like how, what's that girl's name that was doing the ritual? She was
Madge,
right? Madge. Yeah,
Madge,
exactly.
yeah.
Yep. So I love seeing how that kind of played out. And then of course, he who walks behind shows up. That was crazy. As it was when I first read it, that was nuts. And seeing that and seeing him kind of like acknowledge Harry and say, like, I haven't forgotten about you. I remember you. And so, yeah, I really, out of the two, I enjoyed that one a lot more, but that's like one of my favorite throughout the whole thing, maybe except for Battlegrounds, but like, that's one of my favorite, like, fight scenes / like story ending scenes where like everything kind of piles together and coalesces into this freaking sweet fight.
Because it's so strategic. I love these moments that the Dresden Files is so good at, because before before they even go to the Wraith Manor, Harry and Murphy have this conversation, right? And he's like, I need you to do something for me. And she's like, okay, what is it? And then the chapter ends. So you don't get that conversation.
Yeah.
And so then when they go into the deeps, we think that Murphy has been kind of controlled by Lord Wraith, which she has a little bit, but she knows what to expect, and she knows
Murphy's Murphy.
Yeah. And she knows, like, she knows that she needs a strength of will to get over this. And, you know, I really noticed it this time, how Harry was like, this is not a fight that I can win for her. Like, this is something that she has to come through on the other side on her own. Like, even if I were to intervene, it could have like serious repercussions for her. So she needs to work through this. And, you know, I thought that was so interesting, and how they kind of played Lord Wraith, and, you know, Murphy made it seem like she was a lot more docile than she actually was.
Yeah.
And then she comes in with the leaping kick and breaks the bodyguard's face.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was, I loved that. The thing that I thought was weird was, maybe I misheard this time around, but Lord Wraith, when he was in the dark and kind of flitting around, didn't he snap Murphy's neck?
No, well,
or
no, that was
whose neck
Thomas.
did he snap?
That was Thomas. Yeah, he snapped Thomas's neck.
Oh, okay.
Yep, and killed him.
Yeah,
and then, of course, Harry thought he was dead, and so that was terrifying. But
yeah,
he was all right.
Makes sense.
Spoilers.
Yeah.
What did you guys think of how, I guess, Jim Butcher has kind of progressed as an author up to this point, or James Marsters, how he's progressed as a narrator? Do you guys remember, or did you guys notice anything specific of just kind of the how he's progressed?
Yeah, so I'll talk about the James Marsters, the narrator. In the first couple books, you know, probably the first, where does this one, is this book 6?
Yeah.
The one that okay, Blood Rites. So yeah, I would say the first like maybe 3 or 4 books, it was not, I don't want to say bland, because it wasn't bland, but it's nothing like it is now, I guess.
Yeah.
He was kind of like, I feel like he was getting his feel for it, trying to understand, you know, some of the names were mispronounced, not on purpose, obviously. I think Jim Butcher fixed that later, but some of the emotions I didn't feel as much as I felt like I should have, just in the reading anyway, in the reading or listening. But like this book, like I think sets the tone for James Marsters' ability to like read these books and be the Dresden Files narrator, right? Like that's what he is. Like that's what people know him for. And so it was really, there's a lot of emotion that I felt really well. And there was, you know, scenes where like he really got into it. If Harry was tired, he'd be breathing hard and this, that. It was super cool. And anger, you know, I love hearing Harry's anger when he gets these moments where he's just fired up and it's like, you did something, and he just really like portrays that really well. So I think that it's gotten way better. And I think from this book on, it stayed better. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, I think, you know, by this point in the books, James Marsters like is Harry, right? Like he is fully like embodying like what Harry is. And, you know, I'll talk about it a bit later, but the moment where Harry and Thomas soul gaze, like that, there is so much emotion in that scene, and it makes me like sob every time I go through that scene. I cry so hard. But Jim Butcher, you know, it's kind of hard to say how good his writing has gotten up to this point, but I did notice in this book that he is very good at action scenes. Like he's writing action scenes very, very well, and he's writing emotional scenes very well. And not only that, but just Harry's like overall like kind of off the cuff like sarcastic wit is way more in this book. Not that it wasn't before, but like he has so many funny lines in this book. Okay, so let's talk about, I only have a couple things for it, but just the way the storytelling, right? You know, nothing has really changed in this book, but it was a couple things that I really noticed, especially after reading a lot of other fantasy recently. I really forgot how much Jim Butcher kind of describes every environment and every room. And like everywhere they go, the whole place is described really well. And that's probably due to Harry being a private investigator, and he's used to coming into a room and kind of looking at it and describing it in his head, right? And you know, when I was reading these books when I was a little younger, I just assumed that every other fantasy book would do this. Like every other book would like describe your environment. Like I thought it was kind of a standard practice for a novel, and it's not. You know, I've read a ton of fantasy in the past couple of years that does not describe the environment at all. Like it'll tell you if they're in the woods or in a city or something, but they don't go into the detail that Jim Butcher does. And I really, really appreciate that about these books. And I forgot how much I had missed it.
Yeah, I mean, when I read that, it reminded me of, you know, so my first book after reading the Dresden Files, and I binged, I think the 13 books I did in like 16 days or something ridiculous like that. Like I was barely more than like a book per day, right? You know?
Wait, the Dresden Files?
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah, like
That's
I mean,
impressive.
a big part of it was like I had a job that I could just sit down and listen to, you know, 8 hours of book a day, and then you know, you've got your commutes and stuff like that, right? So like most of the books come in, you know, 8 to 10, 12, sometimes 16 hours, right? Until you get to the later stuff, right? Those really kick off. But going from the Dresden Files to Name of the Wind, Rothfuss is never going to not get crap about that for me, because it was so like a bucket of cold water in the face that I spent 4 chapters listening to disembodied voices in a tavern, because I don't know what the fuck these guys look like. I don't know how old they are. I don't know what the tavern looks like compared to like McAnally's is like, you know, it's like a C location, right? It's like, it almost shows up in every book, but it's not one of the main important ones. Like, I mean, maybe it is in some books and whatever, but like there are 13 stools with 13 tables and 13 fans, and like you freaking can visualize this place, man. But like I couldn't even tell who was talking in the first 4 chapters. So yeah, like compared to other books and stuff like that, like Dune's another one, right? I had such a tough time keeping track of like who was who, because all I'm getting are these alien names. And it was like, oh, well, that guy's the bodyguard, and that guy's the guy that just kills people, and that guy's the guy teaching the son or whatever. And it's like, so like, I don't know, it doesn't really help me keep track of them, you know, like, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, other fantasy books do not really follow the same kind of guidelines that Jim Butcher has for his books. And I think Jim Butcher very much has a kind of like a style guide for his books. Like, you know, every time Harry comes into a room, it's explained to some extent, sometimes a lesser extent, sometimes a greater extent, but it's always explained what he's walking into. Even when they go down to hunt for Mavra and they're in the Red Cross building, I could totally picture like exactly what that place looked like. I think this was also, it might have been done before a little bit too, because it was definitely done a little bit in Stormfront, but this is where I really started to notice, because they're so wildly different. We see these 2 storylines that seem completely unrelated, and they're kind of going on at the same time, and Harry is having to jump between these 2 major plot lines of the book, and then they they kind of interconnect. I don't think they really interconnected in this book that much, but they do in other books.
Are you talking about the two as in being like the whole Deeps problem and then the Malocchio? Those two?
Yeah, like the Mavra storyline and the porn storyline, the ritual storyline.
Yep, I'm on board.
The Scourge doesn't necessarily tie in, but like Gabe was saying, the Malocchio and the what winds up in the Deeps, like that ends up all being related, and it's a lot of that stuff, like even in Stormfront, right? Like he does that where he's got the so we just watched Chinatown, so I gotta give a shout out to the director's favorite movie practically, but it's another one of those where it's a noir. It's Jack Nicholson. He's a private investigator, so there was a lot of parallels there, but the style of having 3 to 5 problems going on at the same time, but they are actually related, right? And that's one of the things I do still enjoy about Stormfront, why like I don't just throw it in the bin or whatever, because it's like, well, my husband's missing, turns out husband is also the villain of the book, spoilers. So like, and then it's like, what this shit is killing people, and then it turns out that it has to do with the White Court power play, because of course it does,
right. And in Stormfront too, there was the whole like, my husband is missing. He turns out to be like, my husband's missing. There's black magic happening in Chicago, and there's like this third eye drug ring going on.
Right.
For real.
And so that I really like, I did really like how all that tied in together, for sure. So how has Butcher kind of expanded the world in this book? Did you guys like learning about, I mean, we obviously already know all this stuff because we've read all the books, but like in this book, we get to learn more about the White Court and how their powers and demons work, and how love protects humans from them. And then all the stuff with the Black Court. Did you guys enjoy kind of going back to the basics here and kind of I guess rereading like this stuff?
Yeah, I would say, and this will be short and sweet, but on the White Court and learning, reading later, obviously, like you said, we know, but like relearning about their political hierarchy and how not just that, so you have the house side, right, of the business side and whatnot, and Lara and her father, Lord Wraith, and all this stuff, which is very interesting. And then of course it pulls back to Thomas and Harry, and they soul gaze. They see Harry can like literally see like what the demon is, right? Like what is how is this is Thomas, this is part of him and whatnot. So that was super cool. And I don't really have a lot more on that other than the White Court. It was very interesting to see how that all worked.
Right. It's hugely foundational, because if you think about it too, like the books that lead up to this, right? So like Grave Peril is so very much just a vampire book, right?
Yep.
The Red Court vampires, for all intents and purposes, are just like any other vampires that you would see in most other movies, right? So, if you were to be pedantic about it, like most of the vampires that you would see would be Black Court vampires, right?
Yeah.
But Jim takes the Black Court vampires to the undead extreme, right? So, you could very easily see like Salem's Lot or, Dracula, any of the hundreds of variations of Dracula or anything like that. Like those, it would be very easy to kind of push the Red Court into that, right? Because they kind of filled some of those tropes. They're literally directly from Dusk Till Dawn, pretty much. He pretty much lifted that concept. Like he lifts sparkly vampires for the White Court. Okay, we'll give him a little credit. Anne Rice, more types of weirdly sexual vampires, right? And less drinking blood. But you really finally start to understand that there is a difference, right? We've been dealing with the Red Court since Grave Peril, especially. You've got these little instances, like I don't remember where and how much, but it's like they're taking shots at him on the daily basis now because they're at war, and he's kind of the resident pain in the ass and the guy who kicked it off, right? And so you really differentiate that with what's it call him, One Ear or whatever, like the one security guard who gets taken
One Ear,
early. So you've got that where it's like he's all but like a glorified zombie. He's got like bits falling off of him, right?
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
more like what is it, Dead Alive or whatever. We were talking about Lord of the Rings earlier, so I've got the director's horror movie on my mind. Anyway, so you get those differences, and then very clearly you've got sexy vampires, and to kind of give them some credibility in the supernatural community, we'll call them succubus, the incubus, whatever. But it finally starts to differentiate here, and it's not, like everybody jokes about it when you say the porn book, exactly what everybody's talking about.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there's like hardly any of that actually at play.
Yeah.
It's just that literally these guys' entire food chain and their social structure and everything ties back to sexual domination or something along those lines, right? So like at the very end, you get the very literal pitting their hungers against each other, between Laura and Lord Wraith. But like she is even a porn star because of course she is, because that's a very easy way for her to feed. Or like finding out that the demons don't mature, right? So if right around puberty, if you're actually truly in love with somebody and your first time is pure, that can kill the demon. And just all these little nuances, and it builds rules and things that pay off time and time again. Like talking about turncoats, one of my favorites, right? You see a lot of that again. Minor spoilers, I guess. The White Court comes back in a big way in Turncoat, right? Not that you don't see them again since then. White Knight's another big one, obviously, right? Because you get additional flavors of emotional vampires and that sort of thing. So but a lot of those rules like come back. It's not just like, well, that was fun, we did a sexy vampire book. Not
it
quite.
stays.
Well, well, isn't that funny how really the Dresden Files is the only book that I know of, or book series that I know of, that has really pulled that off, because I don't read Discworld or Orconomics or any of those kind of funny fantasy books, because I'm like, that's not why I read fantasy. Like I don't want to read a comical fantasy book. But Dresden Files does it in such a way where they can have a porn book, like you said, everybody knows what the porn book is, and still have as much of a serious scene as the Harry and Thomas soul gaze. There, like he pulls off like major feats of just a perfect balance between goofy and funny and odd, and a very like serious story, a very like well put together story, something that stands up to really any other fantasy world building.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much you could expand on and go into depth with that too, because it's like again, even when they're on set, right, there are so few references to what they're actually doing. Like so much is like even having the guy walk by in like a construction worker's outfit, right? Like that practically doesn't happen because it's so like ancillary to what's going on, right? And so instead what you have is like, guess what, these are people doing jobs, so you've got the guy that's like he's a school teacher or whatever, he just does this to actually make ends meet. You've got the guy who gets all bent out of shape because Harry is flippant with him and uses some like quick and dirty like nickname, and the guy's like, what's that supposed to mean? Oh right, because Harry references himself as a stunt double, right? So the guy gets all bent out of shape like, I don't need a stunt double, I'm a man enough for this. And so you get all these little nuances that like, okay, these are porn actors and whatever, but again, we're not like I guess part of it is coming out because like, so Harry gets so much crap from like a wider fan audience and that sort of thing about being such a chauvinist and so about the male gaze and everything like that. And there's so many moments like that. lacking here. You
Yeah.
get Trixie Vixen, which is such like a comically bad name, but it's like
Yeah.
she's almost like mustache twirly as a villain, except that she's a she, and
Right.
obviously she shaves that mustache, but
Yeah.
she's so comically bad as a villain, that
Yeah.
she can only be a patsy. But you get some of that stuff, and there are moments where Harry's like, no, I mean, one more joke and she's gonna fucking shoot me.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
could actually be the end.
Yeah.
So it's just it's a fun book because it's like, yeah, everybody knows what you're talking about, but like certainly if you haven't read it, you might get the wrong idea and be like, oh God, what crazy
What
fiction
happened
is
here? Yeah.
but like especially contrast it with Death Masks. Death Masks literally has a BDSM scene that will come back later, believe it or not. I mean, they're not going to talk about the sexy time, but but that is more sexy than a lot of what happens in Blood Rites, beyond just focusing on the business side of it. Harry's, literally stringing up lights, which is kind of funny as a wizard who blows up technology. Stuff like that. So, it's just, it really is a weird threading the needle in a setting, that he uses beyond, who's getting it on with who and whatever. So,
I love I love like the Reddit posts and stuff that are people who are like, I was reading through the Dresden Files for the first time, and I had the Death Masks audiobook up on my work computer when I was in the office, and then all of a sudden they're boning each other, and he's like, I'm trying to turn down the audio on this BDSM scene.
Oh god,
because everybody can hear it.
Yeah.
I love that. So what did you guys think of the new magical stuff that we get in this book? I have some of it listed here, but like we learned about the curse and some of this other stuff.
That's what I was gonna say about the Malocchio, and I think that I'm so bad with names, and forgive me, but what is the guy, the porn producer, like the guy that owns the company's name?
Arturo
Genosa, exactly. So he, like, the first time he sees Harry, he asks him, like, do you know about this curse? And it was Italian or something else, and he kind of explains it. He's like, that's the evil eye, the Malocchio. And then so that that part right there, like, in my mind was like, all right, we're gonna learn some new shit right here. Like, we're gonna see something cool. We're gonna do this, and then learning more about it and the whole the entropy curse behind it and what the ritual does and this, that, and the other was super cool. And I like, even in future books, and I won't give anything away, but I really enjoy how, every couple of books we'll get something new that Harry can do or use, or like a different thing that he hasn't needed to do, but then now he does, and we learn about it and whatnot.
Yeah, I really, I was thinking about it today, and I'm like, you know what? I actually really like the whole ritual thing when he's kind of explaining that near the end of Blood Rites, and he's talking about how, that's where you get this idea of like 3 cackling witches, because there has to be 3 of them. Like, one of them has to like supply the energy, another one has to like shape the energy into a spell, and then the third one has to pull the trigger. And I'm like, I would really like to see Harry be involved in a ritual and kind of get all that from his perspective, and like just see like what part of the spell he has to hold in place while the others do their thing. I think that would be super, super cool to see.
That would be cool.
I mean, so with Harry, though, you do get it in a couple of different points, I could say, where he does something similar, not necessarily where he's pulling in an outsider, right? But in the future books, there's a couple of places I could think where he does something very similar, and he talks about different mechanical things, like when he summons Olsharavas. I forget exactly which book that takes place into, but it's a fun little interaction because he talks about the different focuses he uses in the
circle,
payments, and things like that. The tribute,
the tobacco. It was like tobacco. Prince Albert's tobacco, I think, was the main one,
I think
or
it's
something like that.
I think it's Stormfront or Grave Peril when he's got all the different items that he has to give to the little doll thing, right? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I'm
It's,
pretty sure that's
I
it.
didn't think it was that early, but yeah. So, but in any case, like he does it with other creatures, and certainly more powerful than just like a small
Yeah.
oracle to get some answers and whatnot. But you know, like the difference is like Harry's the badass, right? He does a lot of this stuff, as he says in Stormfront. He went to school, right? He's the wizard. He's not, you know, this cackling witch who, you know, made a pact with a hedge demon or something, or somehow
Yeah.
got in with an outsider, which, you know, we find out here was all Lord Wraith doing, right? He's more or less
Yeah.
being sponsored here, which has some
Right.
interesting implications. But yeah, so. But anyway, like, yeah, you don't see him do, you know, like group magic per se.
Yeah.
You know, but
Yeah, I would love to see him be part of like a group and all like trying to hold a spell together and like backing one another. Also we see this this bear belt buckle that
Yeah.
gives him an insane amount of like magical energy. And it's like, why in the fuck does he not use this in
Yeah.
future books? I understand that it has like consequences and stuff to using it. Like it kind of drains him a bit, but with his knowledge by the later books, by his knowledge by like even changes or onward from that, like he should be able he should be able to make something that, you know, does something similar that doesn't have as many drawbacks or something. I just thought it was weird that we never really see this belt buckle again.
yeah, I mean, it's part of the magical rules that, you know, nothing happens for nothing, right? Like,
Yeah.
he always has to put in, and you see some other great examples. Like one of the best examples in my mind is White Knight. So you'll see some other examples where it's like he follows Newtonian physics, even though he's literally using magic.
Yeah.
There are costs. The energy comes from him or the environment or things like that, right? So there's Word of Jim if you guys like want to dig into it. I mean, you guys, people watching mostly, right? You know, where it's like he talks about how he does a lot of this stuff on his spare time, but, you know, Dresden really is almost a pauper like throughout the whole thing until the next book, which you'll find out about. And so like some of his gizmos are expensive, or, you know, it takes him months and months and months to pour the appropriate amounts of energy in, or whatever, right? And one of the things that Jim Butcher likes to talk about a lot is that he doesn't give Harry that kind of time anymore. And so, you know, like one of the best gizmos going forward is like he gets these force rings that he uses over and over again, and he's able to passively charge those. And by now he's got his duster going, right?
Yep.
You know, so his whole thing with his duster as well, where it's like it's basically passive, you know, that he's able to keep going. So he doesn't get these big one shots, and really like outside of what become his like normal things like the force rings or the blasting rod or a staff or whatever, that are like, you can't hardly imagine a wizard without those tools. Like the bear buckle is one of the last hurrahs that we get about his like magical genius, right? Like at least that he carries on him. He's got a couple other gizmos that he uses, you know, in the near future, but that's one of the last main hurrahs. And then like you don't even see potions again for a real long time, you know. And it's like, oh yeah, shit, he used to make potions like every book, you know, so.
The other magical bit that I really liked from this book was when him and Murphy are on the motorcycle and he does his like Lancelot impression. You know what I mean? They're riding through the White Court property, and he's like on the back of the motorcycle, and he's got his staff, and the truck is coming towards them, and he's telling her like don't slow down, like go as fast as you possibly can, because he needed physics to be on his side, right? And so, you know, they're going super fast, and she's like screaming as they're running up to this truck, and then he emits a lance of kinetic energy that I loved, just like how he uses physics and how he talks about it, because didn't he essentially make like a ramp that was going towards them and then tilted them to the side? Like it was going at them and then tilted so that they go veering off away from them.
Right.
And yeah, I thought that was so awesome. And it's another good example of how good Jim is at writing these action scenes. Cause I just listened to this part earlier, and I was like as soon as like when the truck got hit and like Murphy and Harry are cheering, like I'm like driving in my truck and I'm like, yeah, like let's go. And I was so stoked. And then of course I exploded into laughter when Murphy smiles at him and says, I think you were right about the vibrator thing.
Yeah.
About the motorcycle being a giant vibrator.
I want to say there's a couple times too, even in later books, where like Murphy's got her Harley and she looks at Harry, she's like, "Get on, bitch!" Like that.
Yeah.
She says that like a couple of times, and I remember, I don't know what book it is, and I'm not gonna say anything because it'll give away, but I would laugh so hard because it's like it was unexpected, at least for me.
Yeah.
Like I would not expect her, and it happens like 2, maybe 3 times, and it's freaking hilarious.
Yeah, I think this was the first book where she says that. This is the first book where she says, "Get on, bitch." Yeah, I love that. Do we want to talk about some of our favorite characters from this series and kind of what they did in this book and kind of how they progressed and new things that have happened to them?
So I would probably, my favorite out of this book would be Kincaid. And I know I said that earlier, but I really enjoy his mentality and attitude towards the way that things happen. You know, he's a gun for hire, he's an assassin.
I love how we get this thing Kincaid says, where Kincaid's talking about how he would kill Harry, and he casually says that he would use a rifle at 1,000 yards if he ever wanted to kill Dresden without incurring his death curse. Very interesting.
And that terrified Harry. Like he was like, "Wow,
Yeah.
that actually scares me."
Yeah, Harry's like, that would actually work.
Yeah.
And then it makes me ask the question, like, why have none of Harry's enemies done this? Like, why has nobody else like come up with this idea to just like either blow up Harry's house or shoot him from a long way off? Like, come on, guys. Like
Yeah, so some of these things do get tried, right? Like there's a couple of times I remember like the Red Court trying to like burn him out, you know, or something like that. You see in the next book, you're going to see all sorts of wards and magical defenses that Harry has being overcome by, you know, a very simplistic kind of thing where he's like, crap, I didn't think of that, right? You know, so some of it is like because the plot demands it or whatever, right? But like real in-world explanations are like, first of all, Kincaid is top of his game, you know, like for an example. And a lot of the old monsters don't think like that, right? You know, like you could get something in parallel with like what Ortega did in Death Masks, where he pulls the revolver on him, but he's got it inside of his flesh mask, right? So he's cheating, but he's done such like it's like a high school or middle school thing where it's like, no, I've got my phone inside my hoodie so I can look up the answers while it looks like I'm just sitting here doing whatever, you know, but like that is like a little bit of a clever usage, but like it is somewhat important that Kincaid knows these things for later, you know.
Yeah, for sure. Kincaid says, "I'm as human as you are," when Harry accuses him of being supernatural, but we later see a demonic form around him when Harry opens up his sight. And then, of course, Ebenezer says later that he is a scion. We don't know what he's a scion of, but Ebenezer did say that Kincaid worked for Vlad Tepish, I think it is, which is Dracul's son. And so I'm really looking forward to finding out more and more about that. Even like, you know, minor spoilers, I guess, but even at the most recent books, we still don't know that much about Kincaid. Like we really don't know that much about him. And so I can't wait until he, till we find out more. Ebenezer and Kincaid hate each other.
Yeah.
They absolutely despise each other. And Ebenezer also mentions that they are both, that's when Ebenezer mentions that Kincaid worked for Vlad, and that's when you find out that Ebenezer is the Blackstaff.
Yeah.
And so they're both kind of assassins of a sort, and that Kincaid had broken some sort of proprietary rule, I guess, that like some working relationship that they had with each other. Yeah, I really liked what we found out about Ebenezer in this book. We find out he's the Blackstaff and Margaret Le Fay's old mentor. And that we'll learn more about him in future books. And I love this just this kind of I have to edit that out. Just kind of this just kind of this squabble that Ebenezer and Harry have. This kind of like Harry believes that Ebenezer has lied to him, which he kind of has, and
Yeah.
Ebenezer taught Harry to be this very conscientious wizard who takes into considering the laws of magic and using your power to help people and not to harm them. Meanwhile, Ebenezer is the Blackstaff of the White Council.
Yeah.
And he has a license to kill. I always love this reveal.
Yeah, that was a touching, and I would say in a bad way, but when Harry confronts, Ebenezer's trying to like help his hand out, right? And see, I can dull the pain, I can do this. And that entire scene where they're in Harry's apartment, I guess, or boarding house, basement, whatever you want to say. Harry's like got really upset. He was super, super hurt by it. And like, I get it. And even Ebenezer's like, he says something, he's like, that's the hardest lesson to learn. He's like almost in tears and doing that. So that was super, it was just powerful, really powerful.
Yeah, that quote is Harry says, because Ebenezer was trying to say, like, if you ever need my help, let me know. And Harry yells at him and he says, I said, get out. And then Ebenezer just kind of like turns and like looks at the floor and he says, a hard lesson, the hardest.
Yes.
And it was just like this very quietly sad moment.
Yeah.
That's really, really impactful. Any other favorite character moments from this list, or anything that you guys kind of liked from this book?
Yeah, I already said it. Murphy's first get on the bike bitch is wonderful.
Yeah.
And we learned a little bit more about Murphy too in this, and kind of a familial way, about how our family works, and that, it's not crazy important later on, but it's nice to get a little more origin story from Murphy. So that was super cool, and kind of her family squabbles. We meet her mom, like that's super cool.
Her mom knows about the Black Cat files that her husband was a part of.
She was very aware, and that was also cool. She's like, I don't remember exactly what she said, but she's like, I'm not stupid enough to not know what that is. You know what I mean? Like, I know that there's shit happening that we may not know and stuff. So that was cool. That's probably my other one.
Justin, do you have any or do you guys on the podcast, have you guys done any like theories about Murphy's dad or anything?
Nothing comes to mind expressly, we would have almost certainly gotten into it pretty deep with Ghost Story, right?
Yeah.
For obvious reasons. Stay tuned.
That's right.
I mean, it's one of those things where he's kind of a background character, and even maybe a little bit more well-defined than even Harry's dad is. But along the same kind of lines where it's like, something went on and something's kind of important, but we don't always necessarily have the details yet. So I'm super excited because I have this gut feeling that at the end, closer to the end of the story, is when Murphy's dad is going to come in
somehow in a big way, even though he's dead. Like something revolving around him is going to get revealed or come into play in a big way. And obviously same with Harry's dad. We'll figure out how Harry's dad died and stuff. But yeah, that's always been like a super I guess kind of mysterious part of the story for me is Murphy's dad. And I would love like a side story or like a side, spin-off series or something about Murphy's dad. I think that would be a hit. Oh, Murphy gets seen in Harry's sight once again. She appears again as the guardian angel with a blazing sword.
Yeah.
But now she has some battle wounds from her events in Grave Peril.
Yeah.
Right.
And so that's pretty interesting.
That is interesting.
And Grave Peril was the first time he saw her, right? Because he was at the other detective's house, right? Finding out that the nightmare fed on him, and she kicks in the door, on him screaming or whatever because the spell had grabbed him. But
exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, that takes place before the nightmare grabs her, and she's out of commission for the rest of the book, basically. But
yeah. I think so. Up to this point in the story, Harry has mentioned how he doesn't like to open up his sight because he often sees really dark things that he doesn't want to remember. But at this point in the series now, he's seen Murphy twice with his sight. And so that's something that he'll always be able to have with him.
Yep.
I think that's very cool.
It's cool. I want to do one more favorite character. We haven't seen a lot of him yet, but Mouse comes into play.
Yes.
Right.
His dog. And let me just say that this, I'm a super animal lover. I don't know if you guys have, Spencer, I know you've read The Watchers, right? By Dean Koontz.
Yeah.
So that's like my kind of book. Animals, whatnot, they're kind of smarter than they should be. Got some other kind of whatnot. And hopefully that's not a spoiler, but anyways, Mouse is cool. And he comes into play a lot more and you learn more about him, but that's a special dog. And it was really awesome to see kind of his origin once again and how he came into, into Harry's care and kind of how that all happened. So I just had to mention Mouse.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, you'll actually get a little bit more of that when you guys cover briefcases, right? So when you guys do that for your podcast, like there's a little bit more to his story and stuff that's going on, and talking about how things just keep coming back, and like from Grave Peril and whatnot, like there's still more to tie in there. So
which do you remember which short story in Briefcases? You're not talking about Zude. Okay. Yeah. Nice.
Okay, nice. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I love Mouse in this book. And my favorite part with him was where Harry puts him down in the lab, and Harry like wakes up hours later and he hears like this thumping, and so he opens up the door to his lab and he sees Mouse like climbing up the ladder. And he's only able to get like 3 or 4 steps up, and then he like falls back down and then tries to get back up the ladder. I'm like, that is adorable. And then everybody who meets him in this book, Harry just carries him around in his pocket. Around his duster pocket.
The other 2 standout scenes for me for Mouse especially is at one point, I think when he's at SI, Mouse gets a hold of a Snoopy toy.
Yes.
Which is important because we last saw it in Full Moon, because the reason why he's tearing into it is because it's covered in the blood of the Loup Garou.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah, okay. The second you said it, I realized.
Did you know that, Gabe?
No, nobody said it and it made sense. It totally made sense.
Oh my God. I never thought about that.
Yeah, wow. I've seen some people bring that up in the Reddit and whatnot before. And then the other one, just capping it off, I think it's like the last line of the book practically, right? But it's like, why did you get big dog breed dog food? Like, Okay, so just to wrap up our character section real quick,
I want to talk about Harry. We see a darker side of him when he really wants to kill Trixie Vixen. He's essentially disarmed her and he's got the gun and she's on her knees. And he kind of has this inner monologue where he's like, there's a part of me that really, really, really wants to kill her. Like there's a part of me that really like wants to harm her and make her hurt because she's like my enemy. And you know, I think that's one of the things that I really like about Harry, because I do like some of the darker fantasy books and some of like the grimdark stuff. And I really like characters that are very gray or have like a darker side to them. And Harry, we don't see it too often, but he mentions it a lot. He mentions it to other characters and he mentions it in his inner monologues where he's like, you know, he tells the reader like there is a part of me that is not good.
Yeah.
And so we kind of see that come out quite a bit here. And then we see it again in in White Knight with the flashback in White Knight. And so, yeah, I love these moments where we get to see a little bit of his like darker nature, because the reason I like it is because it's something, it shows more about his character as a person, like how this is like a part of himself that he is always fighting against and always having to fall back on his principles to not fall into like this darker nature of himself. And so, yeah, I love these moments where we get kind of a peek into that.
Yep.
Yeah. Just to offer some more food for thought on that too, though, is that you're absolutely right. You know, like his internal struggles are a big part of what humanizes him, and I think are important to the stories. A great scene is Death Masks again, where he's very clearly being the anti-hero while the paladins step out of the room and he has to deal with Cassius and a baseball bat, right?
Yeah.
That is almost certainly, Harry being Harry, right? And certainly really towing the line in some ways, right? He's got a very much like, we don't beat up on mortals. Mortals are under my protection. I'm the sheriff in town type of thing. But monsters,
That's
those
right.
we
Different
take the gloves off, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I think that's what's more telling here, because you bring up White Knight, right? And White Knight's again a very powerful, great scene, but they're monsters again. Whereas here, Trixie is a helpless mortal and whatnot. So in this one, part of why I'm bringing it up is because we won't know more, we, the audience and everything, won't know more until next book. But I feel like in this case, he's actually being pushed a little bit, because you also talk about, in the notes, for example, his staff starts smelling like hellfire. What's that about? Yeah, I don't know. That's super weird. Maybe we should look into that. So
right. That's true. That's true.
Yeah, I think in her case, like you could definitely still make the argument, but once you read the next book, you're like, well, wait a minute. You'll want to replay this in your mind and kind of come to your own conclusion there. But
okay, so you think the thing that we learn in the next book is what pushed him towards that?
I think it's possible, because he starts to have more of those conversations, and sometimes literally, where he's trying to weigh the morality and the quick fix, or what's actually good versus other things, like because some of his, and again, like the struggle is definitely part of his personality. Like one of the other ones that for whatever reason is coming to mind right now is when he's outside the building in Stormfront. And it's like, you could just walk away, nobody would know, you'll survive, and blah, blah, blah. And he's really kind of struggling with himself on making the right choice, right? So like you could make that argument, but this one, I feel like somebody's doing some pushing,
Right. Okay, so let's see. Harry gets his hand burned from a flamethrower. This is something that kind of, it carries on through the next several books. His kind of like rehabilitation with it. And at the end of I I think it's, yeah, at the end of this book, we see that he's got the sigil of Lashiel
Yes.
in his
Yes.
palm. It's the only part of his hand that isn't burned, and that's where he like touched the coin. And also something that I noticed in this read is where Harry got hit with the flamethrower, Murphy had been holding that position before. And so if Kincaid and Harry had been the ones trying to work on the laser things that they were trying to get through, and Murphy didn't go back to go through there, Murphy would have been fried to a crisp, because Harry was barely able to, bring up a shield in time to stop even a little bit of that. So I thought, I'm like, wow, like if events had gone a little bit differently, Murphy would have been fried.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the book, it's very sweet. Harry is now living with his brother Thomas and decided to keep the dog Mouse.
Yes.
I love this kind of one of these final scenes with Thomas where Harry has this moment where he's like, all of a sudden my apartment felt very full. It felt like there was life in my apartment. I'm sharing it in a lot of ways. I'm sharing my life with someone now. And there's this piece of family that I never knew I had that's here now.
Yeah.
And so it was a very, very sweet, heartwarming kind of ending to this book.
Yes.
I was going to say it greatly contrasts with the opening lines of the next book, though, right? So, like,
Yeah. Yeah,
that's right.
That's true.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's pick up a couple of these quotes from the books. This book had a lot of really great quotable moments. Do you guys have like a couple that are your favorites?
Yeah, I realized earlier we talked about the whole scourge and then we didn't talk about, so like there are two great lines that come out of that, right? Beyond like them going in and the interaction between Kincaid and Murphy is all great. But you get the whole like, buddy, you still haven't seen me cut loose. But even leading up to that, the dialogue between Kincaid and Harry talking about the mine, and then how it caps off with it being used against Mavra with Kincaid, Bolshevik Muppet. I mean, like if you don't have the context for that line, it just falls flat, right? But it's such a great moment in the book that it's just hilarious. So
I'll be honest, I don't think I had the context for that quote, or like I don't think I noticed it. Yeah, because I didn't know what he was saying when he said that.
Oh man, there's so many good moments that I'm trying to restructure like the whole length of dialogue, right? Because some of it even starts out with Kincaid being lippy with Dresden in the Denny's, right? So like they sit down to have their first meeting, which this entire sequence is also great because I love these books. But Kincaid's like, okay, so what's our battle plan? And Dresden's like, so we go in and we kill the vampires, and he's like, yeah, but I was hoping for something more like rules of engagement or battle doctrine, and then you get a little bit more of a layer on that when it's like, okay, Kincaid, how would you handle this? And he's like, well, we'd burn the whole building down, like we'd roll bombs down the stairwell or whatever. He's like, okay, but I was hoping for something that was a little bit less like the planning of the Bolshevik Muppet, with all the dynamite. Yeah. And so then, they bypass the mine or disable it and whatever. And, they talk about how if it goes off, not only would it kill all the kids in the closet, but it would probably travel down the hallway and kill them too. And so that's their safe word or lack of safe word, I guess, where it's like, Kincaid, Bolshevik Muppet. So he'll trigger it. So it'll take out the flamethrower guys down the hallway or whatever. So
got it.
Yeah, so it's like I said, it's like all these little moments strung together to that one line, but it's such a great moment. So
I've got
go ahead.
I've got another one here. It's a scene between Harry. So Harry goes to find Murphy at the dojo, and what is the name of that dojo? Because I'm so bad with names.
I don't know.
Really? It's like something, I don't know. Gosh. Okay. Never mind. But it's a dojo. And he goes in there and meanwhile Murphy is like doing this martial arts with these other policemen, right? And there's a newbie and there's, Stallings, one of her partners or whatever else. And he walks in and he says to Murphy, because Murphy just laid out this dude that was way bigger and then there was a newbie and everybody's kind of laughing at it. And he says, "Hey Murphy, when are you going to stop fighting little kids and pick on someone your own size?" And Murphy looks at him and says, "Come and say that to my face, Dresden." And Dresden's like, "Give me a minute to amputate my legs and I will." And dude, that was so funny. I don't know why I thought that was so funny, but that was absolutely hilarious. The quips that they have between Murphy and Harry are really good. They got a lot of quick noted like quips that you're just like, wow, that was well done.
Yeah. I love their back and forth. And then even their kind of lovable moments, like, I mean, that is lovable, but like where they're just being cool to each other. And Harry says, "I need a thug. You available?"
Yeah.
Of course, we said it earlier, but the building was on fire and it wasn't my fault. Like you said, it has to be like the number one most well-known line in the entire series. Like that line is on t-shirts, it's on like plaques, and everything on Etsy has, the building was on fire and it wasn't my fault. Like, so much Dresden merchandise has that on it.
Right.
I love this moment near the beginning of the book where Harry and Thomas are talking in the car. And Harry, I forget what they said right before this, but Harry says, "It's called work. Maybe you've heard of the concept. See, the idea is that you suffer through annoying and humiliating things until you get paid not enough money."
Yeah.
It's like those Japanese game shows, but without all the glory.
Right.
Yep.
Right. One of the other ones that I picked out of here that it's such a great moment. It has nothing to do with anything, but it's like become part of my DNA about it. Is the whole like, what do you want on your vegetarian pizza?
Yeah.
Dead pigs and cows. What? They're vegetarians. Like, so that's how I've ordered a meat pizza like forever ever since.
Yeah.
Anytime.
I love it.
It's like,
I love it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that was super funny.
A little bit more of like a kind of like more serious one that I really liked, because it just shows like this is like who Harry is when it comes to his friends, or like sometimes it takes him a while to get there, but he eventually does. And his quote is, "I didn't understand the problem, but Murphy was obviously hurting, and that's all I needed to know."
Yeah.
And that's such a good, like, I don't know, that's just such a good quote of like how he like views their friendship and like a proper way to view that friendship. Like, he could have been like, "But why? Like what is going, like, let me just fix it," or whatever. But instead he was like, "You know what? The only thing that really matters on my side of things is that Harry is not feeling good about this. And, that's the only thing I really need to know."
Yep.
Oh, good.
I've got another one here. This is between Ebenezer and Harry, and I think this is when they kind of first get together in the book. I could be wrong, but basically they're talking, and Ebenezer says to Harry, "There's a problem with all you young people shortening all the words."
Yeah.
And Harry replies to him, "I'm glad you took the time to RSVP me. I have a problem that needs to stay on the QT and is rapidly going foobar. I'm sorry you called the LD through AT&T instead of using UPS, but I need your help ASAP." I was like, that was so funny.
It's so Harry.
Yeah, it's so Harry, exactly.
We've been reading a lot of books with really good prose lately, like really good, like kind of poetic prose. And I really liked when he first sees Lara, and Jim Butcher just kind of out of nowhere comes in with like this really good, almost poetic prose. He says, "Her looks were almost extraneous. They weren't any more important to her appeal than a glass was to wine. It was at its best when invisible and showing the spirit contained within.
Mm.
And I was like, man, that was a little deep.
Yeah.
I kind of like that. I also love this Kincaid, no felonies without checking with me first. And he says,
Yeah.
Yeza. And then Harry says, looks at Murphy and he says, see, Yeza.
Yeah.
Is this, Murphy says to Harry, is this going to be like the Walmart plan with the marbles? Because in the last, or in Summer Night, he poured the marbles out on the floor in Walmart trying to trip up a baddie.
Yeah.
And then she ends up tripping on them. I love that. Oh yeah, these last two. Harry says, blow me, Kincaid, and Kincaid says, don't you owe me enough already?
Yeah. Yep.
And then Kincaid says, any more questions? And Harry says, yeah, why are hot dogs sold in packs of 10, but hot dog buns are sold in packs of 8? Right before like this super serious situation where they're about to go into like this hellish place.
That's Harry,
I love
man.
that.
That's Harry.
And it's true. Like, why? Like, it's just a way to sell more hot dog buns. Like,
yeah.
Okay, guys, favorite moments. What do you think? Most memorable moments from this book for you guys?
So I would say, and Spencer, I know this is going to be yours as well, but I would say that the soul gaze between Harry and dude,
Harry and Thomas?
Yes, Thomas. I don't know what it is, but like I forget names that easily. Harry and Thomas. Wow. I knew that. Yeah, it's bad.
It's a good thing he's not important to the story or anything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's not a
real
major,
embarrassing.
he's not a major player or anything. No.
Yeah.
But between Harry and Thomas, and it was so cool that, well, not even the soul gaze, but the entire thing about Thomas trying to tell Harry that like we're related in a way where Harry can like absorb it. And Harry's like, no, like you're lying to me. Don't say that. Like blah blah blah. And then finally they get to this point where like the soul gaze is the only option for Harry to figure it out. Yeah. And they soul gaze, and Harry sees Thomas in the light of the way that his demon takes control, but like feeds off of him in the sense, like, you know, you have this demon behind this area and whatnot. It's super sad. And not only that, but his mom comes into play, which she enchanted both of the amulets with kind of herself or a message or whatever else. And I got so emotional when Harry was like talking to his mom. And the whole conversation and whatnot. And afterwards, he's like, you know, I heard her voice. Like, I won't ever forget her voice. It was just so, you know what I mean? And I thought that was really cool. So yeah, that was pretty intense, man. I really enjoyed that. And I think that it sets the tone for Thomas and Harry for, well, the rest of the series, right? I mean, obviously they figure out their brothers and whatnot, but yeah.
Yeah, so that's the scene I was talking about earlier that is like deeply kind of like personal to me and has like some real world applications. Hopefully I won't like tear up talking about this, but you know, this scene, not only does he get to see his mom for the first time, and you know, not only that, but he has her within a soul gaze, so he always gets to see her whenever he wants to. But yeah, so this scene is so for me, this is how I look at it. And I mentioned I think in the first Dresden Files episode that we did, that the first time I read Dresden Files, I was actually in jail. And and
I know.
Yeah, Gabe knows.
Because you were there too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
No, but I, you know, during that time in my life, I was doing a lot of things that I really shouldn't have been doing, including I was very, very addicted to drugs at that time. And I've been clean for a number of years now, and things in my life have changed significantly, obviously. But it was like really bad for a while. And when I got out of jail, the first time I read these, I quickly like picked up as many Dresden Files books as I could. And I had gotten my way to Blood Rites, and I was reading this scene, and matter of fact, I was I was detoxing at my mom's house. I was trying to get all these drugs out of my system, and I was trying to get clean, and I didn't that time, but obviously I did later. And so I'm there, I'm detoxing, I'm feeling like hell, and I'm reading this scene. And of course, my mom was just like any mom would be. She's like,
Yep.
I don't understand. She's like, I don't understand why you keep doing this. Like, why you keep using drugs and stuff. And I get to this scene, and it talks about Thomas's demon and like what it's saying to him. Ooh, wow, sorry.
No, you're good.
What this demon is saying to him, and how it'll like never let him go. But how Thomas is fighting against that.
Yeah.
And I I'm like sitting on the couch detoxing, and I'm crying, reading this scene. And my mom is like, what is going on? Like, why are you tearing up? Like, what is happening in here? Like she's like really worried. And I couldn't even like read the scene to her, because like I couldn't make it through it. And I just gave her the book, and I was like, you have to read like from here to here.
Yeah.
And that is a perfect example of addiction.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that I'm like, this is exactly what's going on in my head.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I love that scene. It's very, very difficult to get through.
Yep.
And I think I hit that scene yesterday when I was driving.
Remember,
I think,
you texted me. You texted me and
Yeah.
said, I just got there.
I was like, ooh, I just
Yeah.
I just got through this scene, and I'm like,
Yep.
like I'm in my truck, like bawling. Yeah, it's a very, very difficult scene to get through for me, but I've never seen a better representation of what addiction is like in a book,
Yeah.
So
Yep. I
That's
totally agree.
Powerful story. I'm not sure I've ever thought about it in those terms, but it definitely helps bring some, much needed depth to Thomas's character.
Yeah.
And it really does feed his own actions and his own transformation over the next several books and whatnot. So yeah, that's great sharing. So
Yep, I agree.
I've always really liked vampire characters, especially when I was in that time of my life, because I've always kind of felt like vampire characters are very similar to addicts. They need this thing to survive, and if they don't have it, they get sick and they feel terrible, and all these different things happen. And then vampires are of course like these super shady characters that will do whatever they need to do to get blood or whatever their fix is. Yeah. And so I've always really liked that about vampire. Well, I don't know if I like it about them, but I've always found it interesting.
Yeah, you can connect to it in a way.
Yeah. Any other favorite scenes?
Oh, so I see one here. When Harry revisited the chapel in the airport where Shiro had died and took his place and basically sacrificed himself for Harry, as he was giving the puppies to Doc or whatever the guy's name was. That was super, because like I was so distraught in the whole Shiro situation in the last book. Like it was really heartbreaking, and at the same time, like that is like the epitome of what like a Knight of the Cross is, right? And would do, and is willing to sacrifice himself for somebody that he believes in. And so that was that was super cool. And it was very, I don't want to say heartwarming, but it was like, it got my emotions out, I guess you could say, for lack of better terms.
It really surprised me when it happened on this reread, because I had forgotten that chapel is where he meets the monk or whatever. And so I'm like listening to him, like giving the dog back and everything. And then while the monk is looking at the box of the puppies, Harry is like looking around the chapel and he's talking about how they redecorated.
Yeah, because
I was like,
you can't get bloodstains out. Yeah, that's what he said. He's like, you can't. They had to change the carpet because of the bloodstains.
Yeah.
Right.
I was like, oh, I don't think I realized that was where he had met the monk in this book, was the same chapel in the airport. What about what about Murphy and Kincaid's first meeting, where Kincaid tests Murphy to see what she's made of? That was fantastic.
That's really good. Yes.
And then we also get a reference that pays off in Battleground later on. We get our first boot to the head reference.
yeah. Oh, yes.
And I don't know, Justin, do you know if there's more boot to the head references throughout the books, or is it just this in Battleground? Because this is the first time I noticed it in this book.
Yeah, yeah, as far as I know, it's only the two, and it mostly because we had a moment where, like, I'm supposed to know these things for our podcast and that sort of thing, and I was having a brain fart, so I had to go dig into it with the whole Battlegrounds and whatnot. And it's like I'm familiar with the boot to the head, but I had forgotten about the song, and the song is what he was referencing. But it's like I'm familiar with Taekwon Leap and the Last Will and Temperament are like the other two, like their little sketches that have to do with boot to the head and whatever too. Classics. Go look them up if you haven't.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that, and just like even Harry's quote about this and how it relates to the Malocchio and the whole talking about the turkey scene, right? It's like, I don't care how many thousands of years old you are, like, a turkey falling from the sky, like that would make anybody pause.
Yeah.
So, just all great. So,
and I love how the turkey falls and then the timer pops out.
Yeah.
And then another thing that pays off later, he says, for my next trick, anvils. We'll see that again later on.
That's right.
Yeah. Any other moments that you guys can think of besides the opening scene is like probably one of, if not the best opening scene in any Dresden Files book, right? Like where he's running through a school getting flaming shit thrown at him by demon monkeys.
Yeah, dude.
And Monkey Voltron. So,
yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Monkey Voltron. Yeah, that was terrifying. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, we're kind of at the end here. Thank you so much for joining me, all of you guys. Any final comments on the books, or if you want to plug the Dresden Files podcast or whatever, now is the time to do it. If not, I'll just edit this out.
No final moments come to mind, but definitely if you are interested in the Dresden Files and you want like a purpose-built podcast, much like the books, we don't necessarily universally appeal to everybody, but we're a bunch of friends that have been doing this for years and we have a good time with it. So, check us out. Just like I said, Google the Dresden Files podcast. It should be us. You'll recognize my face, in various levels of shaved and cleaned up over the years and everything. But,
I was gonna say you've changed a lot over the years, because obviously I'm a big fan of your podcast. I watched it for a long time before I ended up going on for an episode, and the way all of you guys have changed over the years, because depending on whatever Dresden Files book I'm reading, I kind of jump around to all your different episodes, and it's always so funny to see how you guys have grown and changed over the years. Anyway.
Right. Yeah. Depending on which month and year, like Andreas has hair and I don't, then he
Yeah,
doesn't have
yeah.
hair and I do. And, so, but yeah, it's that, and check us out, brokenjars.xyz, has all of our, some of our archive stuff. We did other podcasts for other shows and things. And then once we got through those got archived and whatnot. But yeah, if you like what you see, you can check all that out. So.
Right on.
Awesome.
And yes, highly recommend. They go very deep into Dresden Files books, like, because you guys often split up a Dresden Files book into like you said, like 5 or 6 episodes or whatever, right? And you kind of go chapter by chapter.
Yeah, we didn't always used to, but a non-trivial amount of our time, we did a full reread through the show, and we tried to keep books down to an episode. And I forget if it was Deadbeat or whichever one was first. Maybe it was as early as Grave Peril, but we were like, there's no way we're fitting this whole thing in one episode, even if we just do the highlights. And especially the director should get more into, like you said, a chapter by chapter, like let's go through, and use the book as an outline type of thing. And certainly you get into Battlegrounds and it is just so dense. Jim Butcher has a style where it's like you introduce some details, you introduce some characters, you do some B plot, you have a middle, kind of crescendo, and then you're really going to cap it all off in the last couple of chapters. And Battlegrounds, the entire Battlegrounds book is those last couple of chapters that you would get in most other books, right?
100%. Yes.
Yeah, I realized we were going to be in trouble when it's like the final chapter of Battlegrounds was like an hour and a half by itself. And it's just like, we're just going to have to cover it, so.
Wasn't that the craziest thing? Because I remember I read it in physical form and then I listened to the audiobook, and you always kind of know when you're in that final epilogue area, and I'm like reading the physical copy and I'm like, I still have like that many pages left to go. I'm like, what? I'm like, what else could, like, they're wrapping so much up. It was nuts.
Yeah. Well, and from a perspective, like the next book is technically going to be epilogue, because he's got that many leftover threads that he's like, well, I just added an extra book to my series because we need to answer these questions now, so
it's absolutely nuts. But you guys also do episodes that are like one of my favorite kind of like series of episodes of your guys's is where you go through character by character and decide what their Dungeons and Dragons morality is like.
So
I
we
think
found
Harry,
our fan. Yep.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think Harry was like chaotic good, and then Michael was obviously like lawful good, stuff like that.
Right.
And so it was really, really interesting to watch those episodes, and you guys get really creative with your Dresden Files content. So any of our listeners, if for some reason you haven't seen their show, you should definitely check it out because it's way better than ours, and they're way more practiced at it. You guys, I think I checked the other day, you guys have like 160 something episodes. Right?
Are we that high now? Because I remember the last number that I saw was like 130, but numbers got fuzzy there for a little while, and then then we picked it up again. But I mean, and some of that might be like the new podcast or something too, but because we've got it all in the same place because of how YouTube works. But we're definitely way up there for Dresden stuff. And I mean, some of the deep dive stuff, like it's definitely benefited us. We've got 2 interviews from Jim Butcher himself, so we really get into some little arcane bits of lore at times, just because a lot of his convention, Q&As and stuff cover the same kind of questions. So we try to vet those out and get into some like really deep fan stuff. But it's what happens when you go 3 years without a book, and then 2 years since that, it's like you got to invent your own content, and that's kind of where we're at now. So if you guys have a burning topic, we're definitely
Yeah.
trying to crowdsource some of that stuff because the director's inflicting TV tropes on us right now, and it's good for a laugh, but
Yeah.
we got to get back to some of that deep lore stuff. So
I was gonna say, like, at what point, I mean, Dresden Files is massive, so there's a ton you can do with it, but it's like, at what point do you exhaust has there ever been an
that's a
episode where
good
it's like,
point.
what do we talk about?
Yeah, sure, all the time. Like in recent history, like we milked, we did some mirror speculation episodes, and like we had already kind of done like a broad one, but what we really did deep dive over like 2 or 3 episodes was trying to actually kind of predict or construct what the world would look like, right? So he made this one change, right? And now Harry is going to be, some of this is spoiler and speculation, so I want to make that triply clear, right? But we had already talked a little bit about how in Mirror, like he changed his one decision in Grave Peril, right? So we tried to do the ripples of the butterfly effect from there and be like, okay, which character did what, who's still alive, which battle did he lose or throw, depending on how mustache twirly he is.
Wow.
So we went that pretty deep, and it was funny because at least 2 of those episodes we couldn't get past Grave Peril, or not Grave Peril, Proven Guilty, book 8. And we kind of realized, like, after Proven Guilty, it didn't make sense anymore. Like we really tried to go again, but it was like by this time, if we've got all these other assumptions about what Harry's done, it doesn't make sense. We're not even sure Chicago's still there, maybe, because you'll find out some of why in the next book. But it's like, imagine Harry doesn't do all the same choices and the events of the next book take place. Like, we're not sure Chicago's still there, let alone
exactly
who he's worried about saving this one individual person or not. So some of that was fun. We did that like a month or 2 ago and whatnot. But we've definitely been there lately because we've exhausted a lot of the speculation. He hasn't been doing as many Q&As to mine these little details and fuel additional theories and stuff. So but it's good. I mean, on the horizon, it still looks positive. His Dragon Con appearance, he was talking about hopefully having, I want to say it was Cinder Spire's book 2 theoretically done by the end of this month. And then he was saying, I'm just paraphrasing his quote. He was saying he was going to have Dresden Files done in the first couple of months of 2022, which I'm like, look, man, I am a huge fan and I want to get my hopes up, but I'm gonna be a realist because there was this one time this one book took a couple of years to come out. So
like 5 years.
I'm certainly not gonna hold my breath for for that kind of turnaround, but I will be happily surprised. So that's on the horizon. We have lots to talk about there, and then he's got a spin-off series that he's brainstorming and still kind of getting up to. So we should theoretically have some material for years still,
Nice.
So
well, I think that's the interesting thing, is because Skin Game, and I'm sorry, I know we're going a little long, I'll wrap it up here in just a second, but Skin Game came out in 2015, and so there's like 5 years without a book, but during those years he had a lot going on in his life. There was a lot of like really crazy stuff that was happening in Jim Butcher's life, a divorce, a new marriage, stuff like that, and then he was sick for a long time and got hurt or something, and I think that now the kind of general consensus, and I think what he's said is that his life has calmed down significantly, and so now he can just work on books again. And so hopefully that's true, and hopefully we do get a somewhat finished book early next year, and then released, probably around the same time Peace Talks came out, like August or September or something. That would be super cool.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, the part that I would like it to see him to get back to at least first was that back in the day he used to do 2 books a year usually, and one was Dresden and one was not, right? So he did Codex Alera. So if you really like, Dresden Files, you may give that a try. I really like Cinder Spires from experience. Couldn't get past the first book in Codex Alera so far, but that was like a narration problem as much as anything for me. But yeah, so he's done that in the past, right? So that's it. The gold standard, right? I wouldn't hope for more than that. And that's why I was like, you're going to somehow turn around 2 books in the next like 3 or 4 months. Like, yeah, sure. But I'm not going to Vegas with those odds.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that brings up the question. Do you think that he's got to be already writing 12 months, right? Like he's already, like he's working on Cinder Spires, but do you think that he's working on 12 months at the same time?
I'm not sure. He might have an outline and that sort of thing, but I want to say, like, from some of his, like, we call it Word of Jim stuff because of his Q&As or whatever, right? Where he's talked about like he has to focus on one book before he can get on to the next one. And especially with like Dresden Files anymore, they're just so detail oriented and so much going on. I don't think he likes to split his attention. That's my perspective, right? Like I'm not word of mouth for him or anything, but but yeah. So, but at the same time, like because Dresden is like his longest running work by far, like he can probably just sit down, get in that mindset, and take off, and because 12 months is like a lot of loose ends that he's tying up, he may have a lot of that in mind already, and just need to sit down and put quill to parchment, so to speak. But
okay, should we read Cinder Spires? Is it pretty good?
I enjoyed it. So steampunk is in a weird place where it's like I like the concept of steampunk and I like the idea of like the technology and stuff like that, but it's not actually a genre that I really get into, like books and that sort of thing. Like I mentioned
know exactly
earlier,
what you mean.
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, like the Vampire Wars, the Vampire Chronicles, or whatever this other book series was, like is very steampunk, and it was kind of neat as well. But I was there as much as anything for James Marsters, who narrates the Dresden Files and this book series, right? And so like some of them have neat concepts, but his world building, like I think a big part of it is like, so he establishes this world, it gives you all the details that you need, and he leaves you with like 5,000 other freaking questions. And so like there's just so much extra nuance that I want to know about, and just all of this stuff that we'll hopefully get a lot of additional answers in the next book. But it's it's really thick. He's got an ensemble cast, like there's so many good things. And then, like he's got, again, an entirely different kind of magic. And, he's telling an entirely different kind of story. And it's just really, really cool because, it's one of those that you can go back and read and get additional details and more questions and, things out of it. There's a lot of speculation there too, but it's only the one book. So it's like you can only carry that so far. And how much of that is because we just haven't gotten there yet, whereas like the Dresden Files, we're 15 books in, we can plot points by now, this one is just like one book and maybe you just didn't get to that story yet. So,
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Maybe I'll wait for the second book to come out before I start that series.
Hopefully this year. So
nice. All right, cool. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for doing this podcast for 2.5 hours. And we are gonna wrap it up there. Thank you everyone so much for listening or watching wherever you consume our content. We will update you on Twitter with the horror book that we choose, so that you can follow along next week if you'd like. That's at Files Fantasy on Twitter. Also, please remember to like and subscribe on YouTube, and go check out the Dresden Files podcast on YouTube and Spotify, because they really are fantastic. Their content is great. So until next time, remember, motorcycles are just really big vibrators.
Yep.